The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Callie Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, pushing on the doors of life marked Poe. I'm in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, and I guess about 60 miles from where my ongoing guest went to school in Stockton. James Bloomer, welcome back.
Thank you, Ralph. Good to be here.
Good. I've been getting a lot of compliments on our podcast. People want to know where you were and how you came to find out about your being Babe Ruth's grandson.
Well, it just it came out that my mom, she's always been a Ruth, and it just two and two came together, and the California State Department of Corrections did a DNA test on me, and they told me to hit all the bases or touch all the bases. So putting two and two together.
Okay, your mom. You describe the first thing you said. What about your mom? How did start again?
My grandmother was a suite mate of Lauren Morgan Mercedes Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt University in 1923, and the Yankees had won the World Series, and the Vanderbilts invited my grandmother and her brother and the Yankees to the Vanderbilt mansion, and they socialized, and my mother was conceived. So she was born on September 14th in 1924, and I was the only one in my family that had any baseball ability. And, I've hit a ball 500 feet. I'm 5'6", so kind of,
right.
And the similarities between the Babe and me are unbelievable. I mean, just love of animals. Babe raised pit bulls, English pit bulls, and I had an Irish setter. I took this college with me every class, and he loved music. I love music. I live in music, baseball, and sports, and so it's just my mom never played a game I ever saw her swing a bat, a golf club, anything until she was 72 years old. She was 5'2", and when my dad got her to finally play golf when she was 72 years old, she could outdrive my dad.
Whoa.
She could hit the hell out of a golf ball.
Oh, yeah.
So, my mom was raised in boarding schools, like the Babe was raised in a juvenile home, St. Mary's, raised as Catholic. My mom was in Catholic boarding schools. So my grandmother she worked her whole life for Westinghouse. And, they were the big, locomotives and all kinds of stuff. But Westinghouse, they made the first electric chair. So, but my grandmother was a...
That came in handy, by the way.
Yeah.
Society.
But I guess you could call my grandmother a flapper because she and Lauren were wild women. My grandmother actually dated Elliot Ness, and he wanted to marry my grandmother, but she didn't want to get in the FBI, so she said no. But she loved the horses, and I'm sure she and Babe, when the Yankees were in Chicago, they hit Arlington or Rosemont or one of those racing places. But
now, did she keep in did she tell your mom that Babe was her dad?
Yeah, yeah. And my mother was a twin. She had a twin sister named Jane, and Jane had a weight problem like the Babe did his whole life. My mom was pretty slender until she got to be, 65, but she was very active. I mean, she went down the Colorado River at 75 with a bunch of 30-year-olds, and she was the ticket. My mom was a nurse and then a tour guide at the Living Desert, and just a pepper pot of energy. She didn't sleep much like the Babe didn't sleep much. I can't say my mom had ADD like the Babe did, but the Babe always had to be moving, and I was the same way. They used to actually, my folks, my dad, my mom was a nurse, so she had access, and when I was playing in Little League, they actually gave me tranquilizers because I was so active. And
like Ritalin today, they would have given you Ritalin and
yeah. Well, that jump that the players do around home plate when somebody hits a walk-off, that's a 6-second Ritalin jump.
That's good. That's good. Let me just ask you that. Did your mom have any interaction with Babe in his lifetime?
Well, my grandmother used to take my mom to Comiskey Park to the games with her, and
right.
She saw the first All-Star game starring her father, and that was in 34, I think it was. I forget exactly, or 30. I can't remember exactly what year the first All-Star game was, but it was held in Chicago, Comiskey Park. And she was there.
Okay. Did your grandmother ever meet Claire Ruth?
No, I don't believe she did. But my grandmother was she had a high-rise apartment on Lakeshore Drive in Chicago. And when I was a little boy, we used to go up and visit her in Chicago. We lived on a farm in Galesburg, Illinois. And my grandmother was just a socialite butterfly. She died of emphysema at 56 years old, but she's buried three graves away from Marilyn Monroe at the Valley of the Heaven, or whatever they call it, the cemetery there in Glendale. And my mom, they have a Last Supper theater where people can go in and meditate. And my brother and I would leave my mom in there. She was praying and meditating, whatever. And my brother and I would go and we'd take a rose off of Marilyn Monroe's grave and put it on my grandmother's.
Yeah,
I don't think Joe ever found out, but
he wouldn't have been amused. Let's put it that way.
No.
But, that's
the things kids do. My secretary just got a $500 fine in the court.
What's the matter with kids today? Why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way? What's the matter with kids today?
Well, my secretary's kid just got a citation for throwing eggs, and it came close to some gal's car, and she sued my assistant, and she was awarded $500. The defendant was. So it's just it's a no fun world, basically.
Right.
I told the kid, I said, you should use toilet paper next time. It's cheaper.
off the subject a little bit. You're a humorous guy. Who did you listen to? We are back, James Bloomer. How are you? Technical problems abound, and I'm glad I got you back on the air. What's new, my friend?
It's good to talk to you, Ralph. It's been an active week. Never a dull moment in Cooperstown, New York this time of year.
Well, I want to continue what we were talking about, and before we were cut off, I want to know about your dad a little bit, and his influence on you, and what you learned from him. And I know he wasn't a baseball player, but he gave you a lot of sound advice, and he helped you become the man you are. So talk about him, if you would.
Well, my dad was raised on a farm in Rio, Illinois, and our next-door neighbor was Lee Morgan, who later became the president CEO of Caterpillar. My granddad was a prominent farmer in the area, and so were the Morgans. So, he had that background, a farming background, but he wasn't a farmer. My dad, he had his team. In those days, they had a team of horses that would cut the hay and rake it up. And the team ran away from my dad, and my granddad got so mad, he sent my dad to live with his aunt in Oak Park. Nell Roberts was my grandmother. My grandmother's maiden name was Roberts. So I'm named James Robert Bloomer. And my dad worked in the frat house at the University of Chicago as a busboy cook. My aunt was or a great aunt. She was in charge of the meals for the fraternity house. So my dad was raised around a lot of pretty intelligent people. I don't know if you know about the University of Chicago, but it's a highly academically rated institution. And so my dad was, he was the team manager for Oak Park High School, and they would go and play in Florida and California. They had real good football teams and basketball teams. So my dad was the team manager. And then he got drafted and went and he joined with my uncle in the Army and became a staff sergeant in the Army. And he got wounded severely in Monte Cassino, Italy. It tore his shoulder off. He took 2 years of rehab to get back to where he could coach. And he was a physiology major in college at UNI, University of Northern Iowa. It was, at the time, it was, I think, Northern Iowa State. But he pursued excellence. He's a real taskmaster. He wasn't a drinker. He was a smoker, but he never cussed. I never heard him elicit a four-letter word. And so that's how I was raised. But I had a lot of Ruth blood in me. So I was pretty hard to handle. But my dad...
I can well imagine with that history.
Yeah. Well, my dad was he went back to... we moved off the farm when I was 4, and we moved to Polo, Illinois, and he went to work for Wilson Sporting Goods. And we had a big backyard, and that's where I developed my love for baseball at the age of 4. He had all the best Wilson equipment. He gave me a Wilson A2000 glove when I was 5, and that was the glove I wore my whole career. The A2000. You talk to anybody on any team I ever played for.
Top of the line Wilson in those days. Yeah.
But he sold sporting goods for Wilson to all the high school coaches. In those days, district sales rep would go around to the high schools and sell directly to the coaches whatever they needed for their sports programs. So he was doing really well.
They had authorization to buy for the team. Am I correct?
Yeah. They had they had a budget. You know, they were given a budget, and they had to live under that budget. But they bought good equipment, and my dad was a really bright guy, and he was a psychology major at San Diego State University. We moved when I was 6 to San Diego, and he was going to San Diego State pursuing his master's, and then we moved up to Covina, California, and that's where I played my ball. And my dad got a job at West Covina High School, where he was a high school counselor for over 25 years, and he was my high school counselor.
Well, that's a good segue into how you got to Stockton, and I'm really curious about that. Did he lead you there, or were you recruited there?
No, it was really. I had several offers to play. I was an excellent kicker in high school. I kicked extra points and field goals, and I only missed one extra point in 2 years. So I loved kicking, place kicking. Danny Villanueva, the Rams, used to come out and give clinics at my high school. And I loved to kick, and I was a straight-ahead kicker. And Efren Herrera, who later kicked for the Dallas Cowboys, was in the same league. He was kicking 60-yard field goals, and he was the kicker of the league, all-league kicker. But my percentage was better than his. And consequently, we just I was recruited by a lot of schools, but I went on these trips. Like I went to southern Utah with my buddy, Rich Gleniak, who played football at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And when Cal Poly, we had a really top-notch football team. They won the Camellia Bowl that year in '73. And we went to a trip to Ripon College in Ripon, Wisconsin, during Washington's birthday. And we were on the same plane with O.J. Simpson, and we didn't go and ask him for an autograph. I had a teammate. I had a buddy.
That's restraint.
Yeah. But my buddy, Sandy Durko, was an All-American at USC, had played with O.J., and, he knew a lot about O.J. and all those guys. I used to eat in the when I'd go to a SC game, Sandy would, after the game, he would take me into the team dinner, and we'd eat, and then he'd drive me home back to West Covina. He was dating Betty Disney, who lived right across the street from my family. And that was Walt's. It was Roy's daughter, not Walt's. But
well, you have an incredible photographic memory for that sort of stuff.
Well, Sandy had this old Plymouth. It was like a '49 Plymouth, and his dad was really smart because he knew Sandy was a hell of an athlete, and he wanted to put a lot of iron around him. Well, Sandy later became Elton John's bodyguard after retired from 7 years of NFL football. But he's a great guy, tremendous guy. But anyway, my dad, he was the guidance counselor at West Covina High School, and he had guys like Bill Stoneman, who threw 2 no-hitters for the
Montreal.
Yeah, Montreal. And he later was the general manager for the Angels when they won their World Series in 2002.
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and my dad, I have 2 nephews they're adopted, but my dad used to take them to Anaheim Stadium or Dodger Stadium all the time. We only lived, and Seal Beach was only 13 miles from Anaheim Stadium, so it was easy to get there. Just take the 22, and you're right at Anaheim Stadium. So my dad, this is like in, I think it was 1997 or 8, my dad took my nephews to the baseball game, and they wanted to get autographs after the game. And my dad saw Bill Stoneman, and Bill remembered my dad. Wow. Yeah, that was really cool because my dad, he was not out. His personality was really reserved. He didn't. He had a great sense of humor. He's Irish, and he had a great sense of humor. But he when I was growing up, he was a very stern disciplinarian. And my mom, she was a disciplinarian, but she was a lot easier on me than my dad was. You know, my dad expected great things out of me, and he got them. You know, not many dads can say that they coached their kid to one game to Williamsport and saw him off to college on a baseball scholarship, full ride to D1 college, and you know, he saw his son win a national championship in American Legion baseball, and he saw his son participate in the World Championship triathlon in Kona, Hawaii. Now, there aren't a lot of dads that can say that, you know, because he was a good father, and, you know, a lot of times we bucked heads, and we were still bucking heads when we were playing golf when he was in his 80s. But I loved him, and I just my parents were, you know how parents are. They're always trying to get you to take their side.
Whatever side that is.
Yeah, I had grandparents the same way. You know, one time on the farm, I wanted to go with my granddad. He raised Christmas trees around his pond, and he was always out there mowing the weeds. And I wanted to go with him, so I went with him. And my grandmother got so mad at me. She's tearing into Art, my granddad, and his mower throws up a stone and it hits me on the back of my hand, and I have the scar to this day. And she goes, wow. See? But they had this old gray stone farmhouse. It was on Route 2, north of Galesburg, near Henderson. And Star Route 2 was the route the Underground Railroad slaves used to escape to Canada. They had a basement, and you know, my grandparents weren't there in 1860s, but I could feel the fear in that basement when I'd go down there. And I was down there a lot because my granddad kept his Pepsi down there, and he drank about 12 of them a day. He was always sending me down for a Pepsi. But I had an excellent upbringing. I just, but it isn't like that for all kids. You know, I feel I watch these Little League kids in the World Series, and a lot of them, they don't realize how lucky they are to be where they are. You know, and I found that in Cooperstown with these kids playing at the All-Star Village and the Field of Dreams, and Dreams Park, and you know, they take a lot of stuff for granted when you're given a lot. You know, and it's hard a lot of times to step back and say, hey, I got it pretty good, so I'm going to pass it on. You know, I'm getting a chain with a $20 gold piece on it, and for my 71st birthday. And the jeweler I'm using is Ferris Jewelers in Albany, New York, and they gave me I took them in some hats, and they gave me a 3-coin Babe Ruth Legends set from 2000, and it depicts my granddad in his Boston uniform, in his Yankee period, and Maryland. And and my sister that's 3 years old they named her Marilyn. All right, but yeah, how many kids do you know Maryland?
Right.
Yeah, and they named my other sister Marcia. You know, Marcia.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, but I think she was named after Marshall Field. You know, the store in Chicago.
Right.
I think
big
that's where.
Big wholesalers.
Yeah, they grew up in Chicago, and that's so. It's interesting to find out how you got named. You know.
Right.
So,
right.
my.
No, I was going to say a name by a rose by any other name, that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
If you weren't a James, what do you think you would have been named?
Babe.
Oh, okay.
No. No. Well, my dad was very close to his first cousin, Wayne Bloomer. They also, Wayne's parents also had a farm there in Galesburg, Ohio. And Wayne, I probably would have been named Wayne because my dad was so close to Wayne. And Wayne was an admiral in the Navy and a very successful guy. He worked, he had the Bank of America branch in Carmel, California, working for AGG&E. So he did very well. They taught him how to make wine, and he made wine so good that they gave him gold medals at the California State Fair. So
Carmel is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Wow, Clint Eastwood owned a restaurant in Carmel, and
Hogsbreath.
Hogsbreath. Wow. And when I first got to California, I was stationed at Travis in Fairfield, and I drove to the Carmel Valley, and it was one of the highlights of my early getting around California days.
Oh, that whole area is just beautiful, gorgeous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The first time I saw it is one of the things early on that convinced me that I was going to spend my life in California. I mean, yeah. I'll go back and visit. I said to myself, but
how old were you when you left New York?
Well, I was 19 when I was about to be drafted in the Air Force, in the Army, and I joined the Air Force to keep out of the draft. And like I say, I was stationed in California, and not too bad. Now, you are stationed in Cooperstown, aren't you, young man?
Right. I have lived here for, I was actually riding my bike. I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was riding my bicycle across country, and I've been in and out of Cooperstown 100 times. I mean, I knew Kenny Smith, the past director of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I met him at the American Legion World Series in Tucson, Arizona in 71, and he and I became pen pals, and he would write me every week for 4 years, and I'd write him back. So the Baseball Hall of Fame has a historical perception of the college in the 70s because I shared a lot of stuff with. Kenny was a Rollins College, and they were the Jack Tars down in Florida. Mm-hmm. So he was an erudite individual. He wasn't very tall. He was only about 5 foot tall, but he was a writer for the I think it was not the new Daily News, but the Giants. It might have been the Post. I forget, or the Examiner. But he was a writer for them, and he followed the Giants, so he knew all the Giants from the 30s on up, and he got the job. Yeah, he got the job in '67 to be the director of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. And my first trip to Cooperstown in 1975, when I was a 22-year-old business manager for the Dodgers, I stayed with he and Emmy on Lake Street in the director's cottage. And he showed me these scrapbooks of Ed Sullivan, Jack Benny, Arthur Godfrey, Steve Allen, Jack Parr, all these guys. He kept scrapbooks like you wouldn't believe. And just an interesting individual. I mean, I loved Kenny Smith and Emmy. They were great people. So
now this was in the days before you really knew that you were Babe Ruth's grandson.
Yeah, I didn't know until 2010. But my mom and dad were always leaving these hints. You know, my mom was always giving me things that were maroon. And she always said maroon this, maroon that. And I get to Cooperstown and I look at the Babe's locker and it's maroon.
Oh, wow.
My mom was raised in Catholic boarding school, much like the Babe was raised in a Catholic run delinquent. It was a delinquent school for boys, but there were also parents that paid to have their kids placed there. You know, it wasn't just a social, delinquent.
It wasn't just an orphanage.
No. He wasn't. No, and it's interesting that a lot of people think he was an orphan. But if you see Babe's pictures from when he was 2 and 3 years old, he was dressed to the nines. He was just a wild child. And his dad, who was murdered on August 24th on Utah Street, where second base is now at Camden Yards, was he got tried to break up a street fight between two guys that he knew, and he hit his head, and he died the next day, and he died that night, 24th. So it's been a rough week. On the 16th, I went on the 75th anniversary of Babe's passing. I took 12 white roses in and took pictures with people at his plaque in the Hall of Fame, and I also took them in front of his La Montagne. It's a hand-carved wooden depiction of the Babe swinging in his New York, and he's right next to Ted Williams in his Boston uniform, and they were the best of friends. I mean, Ted loved my granddad, and I interviewed Ted in '85, and I didn't know at the time that Ted was that close to my granddad. But there's a picture I have up in my home that has Ted in his full. He was a Marine pilot, and I don't understand why he was dressed in Navy gear, but he's in a Navy dress uniform.
The Marines were the Navy, a part of the Navy at that time.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize. But he's lighting a cigar for my granddad, which kind of says it all,
Yes.
My granddad hit 342 lifetime, and Ted hit 344. But my granddad wouldn't have been the player that he became had Shoeless Joe Jackson not come in his life. Because Shoeless,
you mentioned that, and I'm holding a Shoeless Joe Jackson baseball glove. It's the Shoeless Joe Jackson company recreates gloves by their era. And I've got a glove that is a recreation of the 1956 Wilson 2000, an exact replica of that. And
that is really cool. That is nice.
I was 10 years old at the time, and when in 1956. So I'm breaking in this glove, and it takes forever. The leather is hard and well made at that time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
well, these kids today, they pick a glove right out of the box and use it that day on the field. The major leaguers, because they don't.
Oh yeah.
And I can tell a guy that takes care of his glove. I mean, Rob Wilfong played for 10 years in the major leagues, lived in the house that I grew up in West Covina, and he oiled that glove, and that was his gamer. And he only used it in the games. He his whole career, one glove.
Wow.
Didn't get it. He was behind Bobby Gripps, so he didn't get to play very often.
No. He played with the Giants for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he got 2 games. Two games. He got traded, and they had that good second baseman. I don't remember his name, but he was. Rob was going to be behind him. Robbie
Thompson.
Robbie. Yeah, another famous Thompson in the Giants' life.
Hey, I got a story about that. As you may or may not know, I was the Topps representative back in the day. And one day, I'm going to Fresno, California, to see the Giants and sign any unsigned players. And Wendell Kim was the manager, and he introduced me to Robbie Thompson. And Robbie Thompson was a wiry, not skinny, but wiry. And he didn't look to me like he was ever going to be in the big leagues, but I said the same speech to him as I did 1,000 times. Robbie, my name is Ralph Tycho. I represent Topps baseball cards, and I'm going to sign you to a contract that will give us permission to use your picture on the baseball card, your likeness, and in turn, when and if you make the big leagues, you get some big money. We're going to give you a $5 check. Right now they call it meal money and steak money. And I signed him to his first check. But I offered him that, and he says, when and if I make the big leagues, I guarantee you I will be in the big leagues. And he took that contract and signed it in a huff and walked off. He was pissed at me. Why? Because I didn't have, not knowing him or not having a basic faith to begin with, I didn't think, I just treated him like anyone else. And his whole thing, and athletes in general, it's what's in your head. What you think you can do, you'll do. And if you don't think you can do it, you won't. And so he was... Go ahead. No, you...
Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say Wendell Kim played at Cal Poly Pomona, and he was a teammate of the guy that Frank Cappiello, who was the general manager at Lynchburg. Before I went to Lynchburg, I replaced Frank as a general manager there, and he got into broadcasting. Mitchell Page was on that same team at Cal Poly.
I didn't know that. I know that that Mike Krukow went to Cal Poly, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day.
I played against Krukow when he was a catcher at San Gabriel High School.
Wow.
He turned into a hell of a pitcher, but he was a darn good catcher. Same with Barkowski. I played against Barkowski when he was playing at UC Berkeley, and he could have been a major league catcher. He was real good. But
hey, let me ask you this, because we're running short on time, and you're in Cooperstown basically all the time. Is there anybody, being Babe Ruth's grandson, have you ever been awed by anybody, the meeting of anybody that came up to Cooperstown or in any facet of life? Has anything ever
No,
caused
not
you?
really. No, my folks taught me. My mom was a registered nurse, and she said I watched her shine her shoes every day before she went to work, and she was very regimented in her routine, and I became a very routine, person. And we all put our pants on the same way. Nobody's that. I work around very famous people, and I'm not odd, and a lot of times what you've heard about them is exactly opposite of how they really are. I worked with Chuck Norris on a movie called Top Dog, and, a lot of people are very intimidated by Chuck Norris, but I'm not. I like Chuck and his brother Aaron. They're great people. And, I worked with Christopher Reeve and Superman. You know how big that movie was. And we used to eat lunch together every day, and when he was doing a movie in called Above Suspicion. But I just no, I don't care if I've been around people that had a lot. My brother-in-law, Stephen D. Roundtree, helped design the Getty Museum. All right. And he ran it for 23 years. And he went to Occidental. Well, Steve was 3 years older than I was. So I was 10 years old. And he was 12 or 13, playing Little League baseball at Covina American Little League. And I used to get 4 hits against him. Every time he pitched, I'd get 4 hits off him. And he married my sister, so I don't know if it had any influence, but he knew I had some talent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hey, James, I so much enjoy our meetings on the phone. And you become part of the network, and we'll do it again real soon, my friend.
All right, Ralph.
Okay,
God bless you, brother.
Well, he's going to need a lot of help.
Well, I'm going to leave you with a song, Ralph, and something to think about. Okay, David Crosby, who just passed away at 81, wrote a song called "The Last Whale," and it's critical mass. He wrote it with Graham Nash, and it was about whaling. And Lahaina just burned down, and it was an old whaling village.
Okay.
And now I'll blow your mind, because David Crosby, Jeff Lynne of ELO, and Alan Parsons of the Alan Parsons Project were on the roof with the Beatles in 1969 for their last concert.
Whoa, I see clips of that.
Yeah.
An awful lot, and I don't think they knew it was their last concert.
I don't either, but they didn't like each other very much.
No, no, and who could blame them?
George Harrison. I met George Harrison in '82 after the Long Beach Grand Prix. This is 2 years after John Lennon had been assassinated, and George, we were at Bogart's. It was a bar on Marina Pacific, and there was a band in there that looked like the early Beatles: white T-shirts, blue jeans, black boots. And George sneaks in the back with his 6 bodyguards. 6 bodyguards.
Whoa!
And I'm standing in the back of the room watching, and George gives me the finger to come over. So I walk up to him, and he goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, they're not exactly the Beatles."
Did he laugh?
Yeah.
Well, I wish you could have had a story about my favorite group, the Wilburys.
Yeah. Well, my brother-in-law ran the Hollywood Bowl when he was when he left the Getty Museum, he went and ran the LA Opera. And under that umbrella, he ran at the LA Opera for 14 years, and he had the Hollywood Bowl and the Kodak Theater and several other venues. And Tom Petty's last concert was at the Hollywood Bowl. Do you know that?
I didn't know that. And Tom Petty was a hero of one of my good friends, Sherry Davis. Not Sherry Davis. Her name is Sherry, and I can't think of her last name. Sherry Davis was the first woman public address announcer for the Giants, and in history. If you, yeah. Was she in Candlestick, or was it at? This was at Candlestick. No, this
she was at Candlestick.
Yeah, and she just went back for they had honored the '93 team, and she announced that team. And they had an open audition in Candlestick Park, and she won it, and I was in it, and lost to her. And years later, I was doing podcasts, and I got to meet her, and she's been on several times. And if anybody deserved it, and it was Sherry Davis.
Well, she was the first,
Davis,
right?
That was it.
She was the
first public address announcer in history. And there's
I used to know John Ramsey, the voice of the Rams and the Dodgers and the Angels. And John Ramsey, he had a voice that would God's voice, John Ramsey.
Yeah.
But I could go on and on, Ralph. I it's just
as can I, and we will.
Yeah.
We will again. I so much enjoy your company.
All right, brother. You have
James
a great week.
Pluma, grandson of the Babe Ruth. I will try on your behalf. I will try to have a great week. How
okay.
About that?
Thank you.
All right. And I might add, you the same. Stay healthy.
Right.
And thanks for listening, everybody. Happy trails and adios.